Candle is really more construction, and if you look at the activity that you guys have in your book, there's a template for them to cut out their blades and so forth. And this is a whole lot more inquiry in terms of the students really kind of deciding. I'm sure that the candle can probably be adapted to do something like this, but Matt, I don't know if you guys want to consider, like maybe.
Well, I was super iffy on having candles with a bunch of elementary students.
Well,
multiple candles.
The candles are kind of a mixed bag, and if it isn't put together perfectly, it doesn't run. And when we did the candles in our training originally, I think there are only 2 teachers who actually got the candles, got the carousel to spin. The nice thing about these is that these generally always spin. And they're really, if it's something that you guys can invest in, it might be a good thing. But this is kind of how we proceed. I liked, for this particular one, we kind of talked about the knowledge that they had about wind energy. So they had their Stellar Girls notebooks out, and we talked about what these were, where do you see these, and then we tested our knowledge. So starting out, wind is a form of solar energy. True, false? True. It is true. And they are very surprised to find that is true, because they don't think of wind as being something that's generated by sun. So we talk about the fact that the winds are caused by the uneven heating of the air, and that actually and the rotation of the earth, and that causes the air to start in motion. And we do talk a little bit about convection and the fact that the air moves because of the way in which the air, because hot air, warm air rises, right? It goes up to the top. When it goes up to the top, it cools and it comes back down. And some of you guys probably have to teach this. This is part of what we do in NGSS. But it happens differently depending on where in the globe you are. And we actually, this particular set of lessons, is 2 sessions. So in the past, depending if we've got more, because we've got 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in our room. If we have 6th graders in our room, when we had 6th graders more 6th graders, we did a paper plate activity where, here's the earth, and we drew it out, where's the air moving, and we went through and did that. So that's time consuming, but it's certainly something that you can do, and it's worth doing if you do, because then they kind of understand it. When we talk about convection, we talk about how the air moves, and when the air moves, that creates wind. Okay, and here, little diagram to talk about it also, because it does change between land and water. And so we talk about, that's part of the reason why, if you're at the beach, it's really hot on the beach, and the air goes up, it goes over the water, and then you got a cool breeze that comes off the ocean. We talk about that. And then when the sun goes down, it reverses itself. And, because of the way that the air moves. Okay, next one, wind patterns cannot be changed by earth terrain. True or false? Okay, so that is false, because we know that as the air moves past a mountain or valley or stream, it's going to change the direction, and it's going to change the speed. And usually the girls have lots to talk about. We talk about, if you stand behind a building, or by a building, does it change where the wind goes, and so forth. Turbines work like fans. True or false? True or false? No, false. They don't work like fans. They are the opposite of a fan, right? They are not generating the wind. They're being pushed by the wind, and that is going to, in turn, make electricity. And it's always nice if we do that, if we're doing this after we've done the electromagnets and the currents and all of that, they have a pretty good background on electricity. And then they start asking questions. Well, how can wind become electricity? I thought electricity was electrons moving, and it generates a lot of questions about how that can happen. The blades of a turbine move air like airplane wings. True or false? Yeah, it is true. So the wind blows, there's a pocket of low pressure on the downward side of the blade. The pocket pulls the blade toward it, causing the rotor to run. And you can spend some time talking about the design of the blade and how that creates lift. Lift is actually what happens to equalize the pressure, and it's a physics concept, and it is something that you can spend time talking about, but it isn't going to help us with the fans necessarily, and what they're going to do with the fans, unless if you want to have them make their blades. One wind turbine can only provide energy for one home or building. True or false? It is false. It can actually generate enough electricity that they can then sell that electricity. They'll store it in a battery and then they sell it to the electric company and it goes out on the grid. So farms. This is actually one of the ways that some of the farms in Illinois and Indiana have actually kept themselves solvent. They allow turbines to be put on their property, and it does take up some of their ground, because those things are huge. It does take up, a pretty large chunk of their land, but the money that it brings into the farm will often keep the farm afloat when things are not going so well. So a lot of our farm, and actually Illinois and Indiana are perfect because there isn't really terrain that's going to block the direction of the wind. So that's also part of the reason why they want to put these offshore, where the wind coming off the oceans is consistent and there's nothing really to block them. So it generates a lot of electricity. Okay, we're going to watch a little video that kind of explains what we're talking about.
We've all seen those creaky old windmills on farms, and although they may seem about as low-tech as you can get, those old windmills are the predecessors for new modern wind turbines that generate electricity. The same wind that used to pump water for cattle is now turning giant wind turbines to power cities and homes. Okay, have a look at this wind farm in the California desert. A hot desert next to tall mountains, an ideal place for a lot of wind. Here's another one on the windy prairies of Wyoming. Now, today's wind turbines are much more complicated machines than the old prairie windmills, but the principle is the same. Both capture the wind's energy. Okay, here's how it works. First, a wind turbine blade works sort of like an airplane wing. Blowing air passes around both sides of the blade. The shape of the blade causes the air pressure to be uneven, higher on one side of the blade and lower on the other. And that's what makes it spin. The uneven pressure causes the blades to spin around the center of the turbine. On the top, there's a weather vane that's connected to a computer to keep the turbine turned into the wind so it captures the most energy. Now, the blades are attached to a shaft, which only turns about 18 revolutions a minute. And that's not nearly fast enough to generate electricity by itself. So, the rotor shaft spins a series of gears that increase the rotation up to about 1,800 revolutions per minute. And at that speed, the generator can begin to produce electricity. So, why are wind turbines so tall? Well, the higher up you go, the windier it is. More wind naturally means more electricity. Larger turbines can also capture wind energy more efficiently. The blades can sweep a circle in the sky with a diameter longer than a football field. Now, what's really cool is that even a small wind farm, like this one in Wyoming, can generate enough electricity to power more than 9,000 homes. And larger farms can provide much more clean energy for our homes and businesses. And it's not just on land that turbines can capture the wind. Our oceans and the Great Lakes provide a reliable and consistent source of wind that we can capture and turn into electricity. The Energy Department is supporting innovative offshore wind projects that will help build some of the first offshore wind turbines in U.S. waters. As the wind energy industry continues to grow, offshore development has the potential to significantly boost domestic renewable energy production, especially in coastal areas. With more than 50% of the U.S. population living within 50 miles of a coastline, Capturing wind off America's shores has the potential to provide energy to countless homes and businesses. Wind energy, on land or offshore, a reliable and renewable clean energy source, helping America toward energy independence.
Okay, now I know that the links were not working today, so I put the link off on the side so that you can copy and paste it. So before we go on to the big turbines, I do want, and Carol has run to make copies of this activity for you so that you have it. But I'm going to ask you to go to the one that is the little candle turbine, and it is actually, there are two parts to this because we've done this one as well. And I will load the PowerPoint in there that we have for this if you would like to do this. This would be a larger inquiry type of thing, where the other one, like I said, is really kind of more building. But there are two parts to this activity. One of them would be to use an anemometer, which is, you've probably seen them on, they usually have them close to airports and things like that. It's basically kind of a wind gauge in a sense. And what it is it is a, it's got 4 cups on it, north, south, east, west. It's on a stand, and it just spins. And what they do is they use a Beaufort chart to measure how many times it spins. It gives an idea of the type of wind that they have. Now, I know that modern weather data gathering is much more, I mean, obviously they don't count how many times it goes around anymore, but they can measure that, and that's really how they get some of our speeds, is this thing spinning around. So the first part of it, part A, is for them to make their own anemometer using little Dixie cups, right? You just put the Dixie cups on there, and then it sets up the same way that this does, where you would have a fan sitting here, and then you would pick a distance on the table or the counter, wherever you're doing it. The girls would use straws and these cups to create this spinning piece, and then they would use it to measure the wind speed coming out of the fan. And it goes along with this perfectly. In fact, we really, we did it pretty close to the same way. They set it up, and then they would measure and see how well it worked. And it takes, I would say, probably maybe about 45 minutes for them to build it and kind of like measure it out. And it is really a nice way for them to kind of understand how the wind is measured. The candle carousel, you guys have probably seen them. There's a picture of them on page 5 of it. This is a very fancy one, right? Usually these candle spinners, they're the kinds of things that you'd see in Hallmark, where you've got a little candle and you've got the turbine up on the top, except it's horizontal rather than vertical, and it works purely by convection. So you've got the candle that's generating the heat, and it creates this current of air that spins the carousel. The candles are a mixed bag. They, in order for the carousel to work, it has to be perfectly balanced. It has to be, all of the blades have to be perfectly aligned. It is one of those activities, kind of like when we did the paper circuits, where it requires a lot of guidance to make sure that they're cutting it correctly. But I believe that you guys have the template for doing that, and you just really cut that out. It's the same deal, except we use the little metal pans. We use the little metal pans to put the candles in so that the wax doesn't go all over the place. And then they have to stand, again, create a stand, and their little guys got to balance right on top of that perfectly. It is fun to do, and the girls enjoy it, but they do get a little frustrated when it doesn't work properly.
Is there a problem with, like?
Oh yes, in here now.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
So for better or worse, sometimes they'll turn the air off at about 3:30. We start at 4, and when the air is off, we don't have air currents, and it's nicely balanced. But just the air currents in here. Yeah, and the candles have to be the right size, and there's this, in order to get the convection going so it spins it, they have to be just the right amount, and we don't want them so low that it starts burning the blades or that the blades get hot. So it's a fun activity, but it doesn't always work properly. So that is this one that you have. Now, the one that I'm going to do with you, again, you need to have at least one of these. Now, the way that we've done this, we have one test. We actually usually set up 3 testing stations, but they have a really hard time understanding the generation of what they're actually seeing on a meter. They don't conceptually understand quite what's happening here, except that the numbers get bigger. That's really all that they know. So there are different ways of doing this activity, and one of them is by measuring load, and the other is for measuring current. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, so I'm going to kind of go into this. So,
Well, and Kathy, real quick, I just want to mention the picture, what you see here. You could also relate that back to the solenoid that we made, because a generator works by having a huge magnet inside it with copper wiring around, so you can make that connection back to them with their solenoid and how that works.
Just do it. So, almost.
yes, but we're gonna
Oh,
we'll have the other
yeah,
one as well.
I'll-
Okay, so now most of what I'm going to talk about right here is really for you, because the actual activity for the girls is not that complicated. It's the setup that's intimidating, in my opinion. Now, I've done this now 4 times, and I am now feeling comfortable with the equipment. I'm not a physics person, I'm a biology person, so it's kind of complicated for me. The first time I did it, those of you guys who are old Stellar Girls people, Tim came and walked me through the entire darn thing. And even when he got done, he was like physics all over the board, and I was like, oh man, I'm in trouble. Right. And he was like talking about stuff, I was like, they have no idea what you're talking about. So this particular activity, even when Carol gives you guys the materials, we have scaled down to what we believe is really understandable to the girls, because you could do this for like 5 weeks and they would still have difficulty. But the nice thing is that they have this concept in their head, and Carol is a physics teacher, so she'll go in there and she'll talk a little bit about power sometimes, and once they have this, they start feeling like, oh, this isn't so bad, this isn't so hard. So it's really intimidating for me, but it is really important for them, because they have to have this concept that this is hard physics, but I understand what's going on here. And for our girls, that's super important. So this is the parts of a turbine, like big, huge turbines that you see here. This is the simplest of turbines. Now, these are things that people make for themselves, right? This is like the simplest thing. So this is a store-bought one, but it's basically, right, if you look at this is not something that would be difficult to construct. And what they have on here is basically a tube, like a PVC pipe that they have put on there. And then they have the drive shaft going through and the blades, right? It's not a super complicated structure. They've got the hub and like this is somebody's drawing, but it was like a, I don't know, like a wooden plank that they had like cut and drilled holes in. This is much fancier, as you guys can see. It's easier. So if you're interested in doing this, if you can invest in one, it would be fabulous, because that's really all you need. Because the girls pull this off. this is the part they do. They just need to come and test here, and they can take turns testing. Does that make sense?
We have some of these parts, and so if you really will do this activity, we probably can provide some of these, but we stopped giving them out because nobody was doing it.
Yeah.
So we were
Most of
giving
these
like,
people were intimidated by this. But having one of them is great. And for those of you guys who do this in middle school anyway, at the very end of the PowerPoint, there is Kid Win. The people who do this, they have an annual contest where kids come in with this part, right? This part, and they go in and they compete in a wind tunnel, right? So it's a thing. It's a thing, and you can do it, and it's fun. It's fun to do. The girls enjoy this. It's really fun for them. This part's intimidating. Okay. Now, this is what our turbine looks like. So I'm just going to point this out so that you know what this looks like. It is in the PowerPoint so that when you get it, you know what it needs to look like when it's set up, right? So this is the piece that holds the drive shaft here, and this piece right here is attached. It's like octagonal shaped metal bar. This fits right into it, and it has this little socket that this piece right here, which is what the girls would get, the hub, this thing kind of opens up and the blades just slip in here. This guy you just press it right in there. It's hardly anything at all. But they're gonna work with this. Coming off of here is this piece right here, and this is the part that I always felt was intimidating, and Tim had to set up for me. This is a little motor here with the wires coming off. It has to be clamped in here and held in place so that this gear, which also slides on the drive shaft, is perfectly made to go on the drive shaft, that it fits in this little gear that goes into the motor. Okay, that's what's going to generate the electricity. Then the electricity is going to go down the wire, and the wires come off here like this. Now, they're going to come bare. However, these little multimeters that we used yesterday, and I will have a picture in here so you know how to set this up so that it works, needs to be set up so that it is attached to the multimeter, and then they can get a reading of something. They have no idea really what this is. And you can talk about it until you're blue in the face and they still don't get it, because they just don't have that concept so much. But they do know they're generating something.
And they should know that if you did the battery.
Totally.
Battery.
Now, you can measure two things on here. You can measure current and voltage. Because we did the voltage to the batteries, we cut our losses and said, we're going to measure voltage because we've already covered that as a concept. And this is going into the battery, right? So we're storing into the battery the same way we made the batteries. So we stuck with voltage. But it is possible to use current on here, which is the moving, measuring the movement rather than the force. But it's really kind of measuring the same. It's not measuring the same thing, but it basically tells them that there's something coming out of here. Does that make sense?
And the multimeter is set up the exact same way as you did for the battery. It's that DCV side at 20.
Yes, exactly the same.
Same exact thing.
Now, those are the pieces of the one that's gonna go into the multimeter. However, there is a second setup, which we were like, oh, do we want it? But this is setting it up so that it measures load. Now, load is simply mass, right? Mass and gravity that is being imposed on the structure, and in this case, it's being imposed on the windmill. Now, because they have so little concept of what's going on, this actually made way more sense to them. It's so much more tangible because what they did, this comes with the kit, right? And I think it's just kind of like a part of the kit, but you can, instead of putting the gears and the motor on there, it comes with the spool, and you simply lock the spool in place. And little Dixie cup attached to some string that goes down towards the bottom, and we just taped it on here. Now, conceptually, they understood better what was happening here because we have these little metal, what do you call these, washers? We have these washers. We had these masks, so they knew how much they were, and they were able to test out their design here to see how it generated current, but also here to see how it was able to do some work. So they would put like one little washer in there, and then their fan would, how long does it take for this to go up, right? And then they could try it again with a different one. How long does it take for it to go up? So we've got a bunch of different things going on here. They are actually, besides learning what we're learning here, learning some things that we're not quite putting names on, but are all concepts that they then can use when they're predicting.
Are
Yes.
you putting the blade part then on in front of this to spin it?
Yes.
Oh,
So this piece right here.
okay, so that's creating, okay.
Yes.
I
So
wasn't getting where that was.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I should have done
Thank
that
you.
right away.
Thank you.
Right. So this is
Oh,
gonna
I
go
get it now.
here.
Okay.
It's gonna spin, and as it does, it's gonna pick up
Doing
the
the
wood.
work.
Right? And we just measured the time that it took, and then they would change the variable and see, oh, what happens when we put it in there? And there's some logic involved there, but they're just little bits and pieces of experience that they can then use as they go on to some physical concept that might not be a windmill, but still requires the same kind of understanding.
But if you're changing blades, you want to keep the weight constant.
Right. It's also,
Experiment.
there's lots of parts to this. Keeping.
Well, if you change the length of your blade, would that create even more length? I don't know.
Great question.
I just,
It's exactly.
Such a
I
great
don't know.
question. Yes,
I
this is what we want them to be thinking
Okay.
about, right?
Yeah.
So
But you
No.
had to create that separately for design.
right.
Because the regular kit is just this.
Yeah, you get.
this comes with the kit.
It's all.
Yes, this piece right here comes with the kit. I don't know, and when we got the kit originally, it was just in there, and Tim didn't use it at all, because he was interested in this part. But when I did this the second time around, I was like, okay, this makes sense to me, and I looked at it again, and right, it just makes it more tangible. So when I did it the third time, it helps to have both.
Yeah.
I think. So we had one set up with this guy and one set up with this guy, but these pop on and off so easily that
Oh.
you could do one of them first so that they get the concept, and then do one of them second. You could do this anyway.
So that's just the same thing,
Yeah.
but you're just changing the plastic white thing.
Exactly the
Oh,
same
neat.
thing, right? So this is the setup part. And when I set this up, and I think, I'm pretty sure I have this in here as well. I have teacher slides in here. It's labeled teacher slides so that you know this is for you. But when I set this up, box fan for each one, and it does take a little bit of setup to make sure that it works properly. So I put blades on here with the correct pitch, which I'll show you in a minute how you do that. And put this on here so that I could tell whether my box fan was at the right height, right angle. See how you're gonna go? I messed up my blades here, but I had to make sure that it would go. And actually, I think that's the lowest. Yeah, it went earlier, so.
Some playing with sometimes.
Yeah, I've been playing with the blades too. But you have to make sure that it's in the right spot. So this and that, and these fans kind of tilt a little bit, which makes them a little easier, but they're super strong. But I have them all set up. That's why they're on books, right? That takes 2 books. This took 3. That took 3 books. It just depends on the fan and the turbine. So you have to set it up and try it out before you start to make sure you've got them in the right position. Then you want to choose some distances. I put 2 distances on, but distance can be a variable. Distance from the fan can be a variable. I had it set at 100 centimeters from where I placed the fan and 150 centimeters. And you could do 200 centimeters and set it up. Because this moves super easy, that's not a big deal. But then when they reset, they always know where they should be resetting from so that they can keep that a constant. So I set that up. The height, okay, talked about that, and consistent distance, right? So you got to try it out. The 3 is not necessarily the ideal, but for setting up 3 of them at a pitch of 20 is good. And I should probably put that on the slide as well. Now, to measure the efficiency of the turbine, where do we put this? Hang on a second, I gotta check and see what I got here. Okay, so we talked about with the girls what this meant and what that meant. We've already talked about that, so I'm not gonna go into that any further, but that's how we're measuring the consistency. And if I remember right, Carol, we had someone taking data at each station, did we, or were the girls keeping track of their own data?
They were doing their own data.
I think they were. But remember, I have high school girls in here, so I had a high school girl at each station, and they would be there to either do the timing or to just like double check the multimeter, and the girls kept track of their own data. But it's data that's graphical, particularly when we start, testing out each of the variables. So with the girls, we took a look. I'm going to go back here. We took a look at the parts of the turbine, and we then talked about the blades. And I don't have, one aspect of the turbine that can be changed, it's the one that we're going to change, is the blades. Now the blades, these are something that if you decide to tackle this, you are going to have to make. They do not come made. However, there are some particular sizes, and I will put these on the PowerPoint as well. So if you want to do this, I didn't think about doing that because I have my blades already made. But this is a standard blade. It is 1.5 centimeters across, and I can't remember exactly how long it is. I want to say 10 centimeters. And then we have wooden dowels that have to be cut to a consistent length. And they came this way. I believe that they come with the kit or can be purchased with the kit, just a whole bunch of these. And we just glued them on. But this is this guy right here. A standard on the hub is 10 blades, I believe. So there should be 10 of each kind that you make. And they basically, there are a whole bunch of different types of blades that you can make. So this one, they're all the same, and this one is for measuring pitch. Now pitch, if you have never done this before, pitch is the slant of the blade. And so when you would put this in, it comes with this handy dandy pitch measurer, and these guys just kind of go in here, and I'm just gonna show you with one. When you unscrew this, these 2 pieces come apart, not always really nicely, you have to really pull at them, but they create a little bit of space so that you can put the blade in. Okay, and then once they have the blades where they want them, they can position them where they want them, they can kind of tighten them up with this screw. But the pitch, to measure the pitch, this has a little stop on it. You would slide this down on to the hub, and you have to look down the hub, and it's like a protractor. And you're going to turn this until you kind of eyeball it, and it gets to whatever you want. Now this, I have found that 20 is the ideal pitch. And then you would go to the next one, and you just keep altering them until you've got the pitch. And I believe, no. I did. I must have put it in R0. But I will make sure that the slide is in there with a picture of it so that you know. A lot of people actually use a permanent marker to like make the line on there, so all the kids have to do is just kind of look at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But, once that's on there and tightened and they've got all their blades on, then it's ready to go to be tested. And they just stick it on there. Okay? Now, we try and do this as inquiry as possible. We say, okay, so here's our blade, here's a standard blade, what could we change about the blade? And have them generate the ideas. These happen to be the sets that I have for testing. So I kind of try and we generate and I go, oh, I've got blades for this and this and this and this, and then we can test those things. So the pitch blades, right? We got one of those. We have blade number. So this is again a 1.5 because that's going to be our standard. And I have a whole bunch of them in the bag so that they can use a few blades or a lot of blades. This is blade placement. Now, blade placement is how far, let me find two of them, how far down the shaft the blade has been glued, right? So this would stick out more. It's not length necessarily, although it does alter the length, but it is about how close it is to the hub. And there are different measures of that. We've got different shapes, like airplane shape and like this weird blade shape and like a oval shape, right? A whole bunch of different shapes. Yep. We've got different lengths, and they're labeled on there, I think like 6 and 8 and 10, and the actual blade, they're placed in the same spot, but they're all different lengths. We've got different widths, right? Going from, I think, 1 to 1.5 and so forth. And then we have different materials, right? Now, these take a little while to do. It is an investment of time. And, but it's worth it. I think it's worth it because it's really a rich activity. So what we would do, this would be the suggested way of doing it. Now, I'm gonna let all of you guys kind of take a set and play with it. But what we would do, we would generate our variables. I would have groups of girls, and each group would get one of the variables to test. So they'd pick up a set, and then they'd set them up, and they'd set up their chart, and then they'd test it out. Once everybody has done their variables, then we have the groups report out. What happened with length? What was the best length? What was the best number? And then we would say, okay, so what would be the ideal characteristic? Now, if you wanted to end at this point, you would say, what would be the ideal characteristics? The girls would decide. You pick out the blades that'll do that for you, and then you test it out to see if you're correct. Does that make sense? If you really want to go at this, you can add another session because it takes a whole session to do this. They would then take all of the information and they would design their own. They would pick their own material, their own length, their own shape. They make the ideal. If you were going to do this for the wind challenge, that's what you're doing. You're saying, okay, we've tested this out, and you have to make the best windmill or the best turbine, and then they kind of go at that. But once you get past this like initial exploratory part, which is really it's kind of inquiry, but it's really more playing around with it. Let's talk about it, and you can really just like inquiry, and it's fabulous when they do it. It's fabulous. Actually, Carol was looking. I have a whole set that I only did the make your own one time, but I have them still so that you can look and see what they did. But I want you to play around with this. So we have 4 setups here. That means really you guys kind of get your own turbine, right? You can pick the load one or the multimeter one. They really do the same thing. And pick one of the bags, the hubs, and pitch. Please play around with it. Play around with the turbine. Make sure you feel comfortable with the turbine.
What
And
was the
things
standard blade again size?
The
1.5,
standard blade size is 1.5 width. Are you putting it in there?
I am.
Oh, yay. 1.5 width. I believe
10 centimeters.
10 centimeters long, and then there's a distance here. I gotta find my rulers.
And these are in the speaker notes, but so if I can't, please review it when I'm done.
No problem.
60 centimeter placement. 60. 60. Oh no, sorry. I don't know what I was looking at the wrong side. 6 centimeter placement. The corrugated plastic, which by the way, these came from political signs.
Yes.
So we didn't pay for any of these. We just grabbed, and look, we're getting close to an election year. You can steal one out of someone's yard.
So people wouldn't see me, and then I would just grab them off the
Yeah.
corners of the street.
Because you should not pay for these, right? Don't pay for new corrugated plastic. But it's lightweight, but it's still sturdy. That's
Can
part
I
of
see
the
what
reason.
you mean by 6 centimeters? Where are you?
6 centimeters
In placement.
in placement, right? So 6,
centimeters.
yeah, which is, these are generally, this is a 12 centimeter rod. So the rod itself is 12 centimeters, and it's really halfway is the placement. And I'm trying to think what else. Oh, the ideal pitch is 20. And what am I missing? Oh, the ideal number varies, but they think that the ideal number is 3, but almost every time we've done it, we have found that the ideal number is 5. They like 5. I don't know. Cheaper maybe.
A lot of money.
Right. So it probably is cheaper, and the difference between them is probably negligible. And what is the other thing? Oh, so we got material, we got blank, placement number.
Each one.
So
And
and the shape. The shape is actually
Standard.
not this. This is our standard. The standard that we made was the rectangle, but the shape also varies, and so it really depends on how the girls make them. I prefer not to have. We made this because this is just easier to have all of your blades rectangle to cut them, but I would not say anything about the ideal for that. Let the girls do that themselves.
And 10 blades, you said initially, right?
Yeah, you want 10 blades for each, and then standard number, we did do 3. So like there are 3 of each material, and I think it's 3.
Yes, it was 3.
No, actually,
Oh, it's a 4?
I did 4. I did 4 of each one. So really, that's just how many of these do you want to make? Because that's really the number. But you guys need to kind of play around. You need to play around with it. Feel comfortable with it. Look at how it's set up. Take pictures. Feel comfortable, so that you have something to look back at. But play around with it. And we have, I'm gonna say, 20 minutes. Can we do 20 minutes? We're behind, but let's do 20 minutes.
We can, 20 minutes is great, and it's no big deal on the next one. We can do 2 short.
Okay, so play. Go. Play. But everybody, you'll need a hub and
Check out.
So this one would be the wood bag. This is the So whichever bag you pick, just kind of keep the blades together.
And so.
Is that okay?
Are you talking about bends? Yeah.
So how
It was
many?
another variable way, above what they could do. Yeah.
You guys. Oh, if you did.
So you need
That was artistic and able to move the wind.
Oh, yeah.
So it really was hard to make it move as well as the artistic part of it. For some, you're like, it was still how they
So as you're doing this, think about what you would have the girls, how you might have the girls set up their data chart. Because you want the data chart to reflect however you're gonna measure.
I'm so sorry. By shape. Turn it around. No, it should be here. Yeah, 3 in between. And turn those ones around. Oh, this one around at least. Wait, turn this one out. This way. This is out. This is out. No, like this. And this one like this. All right, so now you can do the pitch. I mean, you can tighten this a little bit. Only a little bit. Together? Oh, it doesn't close? No. I thought you said they push together. No. Yeah, it twists. You have to twist it. I don't know why it's not twisting. This is the tightening part. That's loosening it. And that's tightening it. No, we'll get a different one. It won't lock in. It'll lock. It'll just be too far. Drop one. I know. It doesn't matter because they're really first. Yeah, it's really first. Why is this one tricky?
Look at that. That's how crazy they got, right? They measured it all out and it's pretty fun.
They're tight there. You can't push that other one can't be lower. This, it'll work. Just okay. Did you do this in your cup? Now we gotta measure. I did. Oh, so down. I'm looking at these. So we're going to put. Yes. And then I'll use my ball and it's like how long it takes to go up. This is the bar. Because it has to be at the same page. That's the other one. Did you hear she talk about that? Well, she's a funny story.
You want to move the turbine up to the line too. Maybe just behind it.
Or it should be in the middle.
No, there's two. Yeah, there's two. Yeah, but you can put like that. Yeah.
So start at one and then.
Yeah.
Dover wants to add the.
When they were engaged, but they found us.
We can start on those and see if it actually is hard.
Oh, no.
Just push it down.
So as much as you think for it's more like.
Okay, now, you have like my super powerful face. It can only go one. Okay,
I've got a little fill in. It's one. So now we're going to. And then you change the shape. Different shape.
because
I just put them over here. So
So that's shape one. And then you have some more shape right here. You want to use the I have them separated by the shape. That goes with your first. Yeah, with your four, you only do six.
Can there be one more?
It is. You just put it on this one.
So there's only four?
There's four, but
Oh.
you only use three.
Good stuff. Anyway, cool science stuff.
I'm gonna record.
I like the.
Yeah, I like that part. This with the.
Actually, for the elementary,
Yeah, that's.
this just is conceptually easier, I think.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
get
they
that
get
it's
that.
lifting.
They get that the numbers are moving. They get
Yeah, but
that.
they don't know what that means. Most of my middle schoolers really know what that means. It's just a number.
So are we ready? Okay, let me reset and put it on. You're gonna put it on high, starting up. Okay. Go. Ooh, that went 10.75. So we know this one is better than
So they're longer.
And it's the way it's shaped that when the wind is hitting it, it's able to go up and down. So that was 10. I need to
Angle
this part now. I don't want to record it. You can do it how it does. So I'm so excited. Okay, let's do this one again. This time I can. You ready? Yeah, these are just put a black mark. Yes. Yeah, that's true. You couldn't say it easier.
They had all these great connections.
Line it up.
You know, women, yeah, sustainability. So
Like it's sustainability, it's like conservation. All right, I think we're ready. Ready? Take the place. And let's see how long will it take? This one, if we add more washers, how long will it take to equal the time it took? Okay, go. We can try
Seven. 7.0.
Somebody.
So this is going faster with more blades.
Well, I'm recording.
Yeah.
So put more on.
Their energy.
There's not a discrepancy of power. So.
Create more energy. I'm saying. So that's pretty good. So now we can
Let's see what the little tiny one
Switch into noise.
We can just switch or we have the bag with the different shapes.
No, you want to try this one? We'll go over there.
So competitive.
So we
Yeah,
can-
what I'm saying is you want to do blades, you have to switch and go to one of those, because I don't think she's got extra ones where you can take this off and replace it. What's wrong?
What do we need?
I know, I'm good. Maybe I jumped in when I should have.
We're doing shapes, so what we're doing is we're trying each shape design to see and testing the time to see the length of the right stuff. So the bag came in like multiple shapes, so we're seeing which
Right.
shape design.
But what I'm saying then is you're gonna need to use, you have to get the attorney. Oh, the hub will still go on.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, okay,
we've
all
been
right.
doing it, we've already tested two of them.
Sorry. Rewind. I'm out of that.
Oh, not totally, we have like 3% of everything. Yeah, that's what I figured. No, I mean, I knew it could work, but then I got there, so way longer.
That is not a factor.
Why is that not a factor?
Oh, get it easier.
So I just printed it.
That's a little better to me. All right, do you want to do it this time? Go for it. You do the I can do all the hard work.
And then I want to try one of those just to see it. I'll watch that.
Okay. Watch stuff. Yes, but it's.
Yeah, well.
People like the never. Nobody's gonna have like solid. That was slower.
It was slower, the second design did it at 10.75. This one was 11.13, and the first one was 27.8.
It seemed a lot slower, and not just a second slower, but it was just a few seconds.
Okay, next one.
I think your pitch is too radical.
Okay, one thing I do remember.
I didn't realize
the
this
blades,
long.
and the blue go like the same. So you see how you have this one facing out, and then you have the stick facing out? Okay. Like, yeah, those are just little things you realize as you go on. Well, it's like a little. That's a good idea, though. Yeah, just like get one thing here. Yes. Well, I was thinking, this year we saw one, so he's a bit younger.
Yeah. That's for.
I got a little like 4.21 was one. Just because there's. Oh, are you looking at the?
Yeah.
That's the highest I've seen so far.
I was just trying to do like an average.
So, like, you know, what classroom where they can look at each other and comment on
One of the things that you can do, they told us to watch it for a while, and whenever your mind is like water or and so if they open it up, they see the photo and they have or maybe turning it and then knee out of the way. Have that short stick on one of them. Try putting it back up and then give it a second. There we go. Okay, nice. So like, and this one actually has so like, yeah,
It's in some sort of a book. Somebody read a book.
Is it the new bug?
I think it is. I think it's one of the new bugs. Black Stain.
You get to pick. High school kids get to pick, right?
Yeah, they get to pick workshops.
Really?
And
I want to say they did it.
and schedule their own day.
Oh wow.
So
Like a 10-minute. Well, they were placed in another class.
Was it stick? Does that matter?
So we're ready.
What happened? They're on backwards.
Oh, I bet you're.
what happens? Does it work?
I don't know, we didn't try.
The reds are.
All right, we'll try. See, I can't talk and I cannot multitask. And I was talking to right?
Yeah. Kids would enjoy this.
Still works.
It still works. It's at 14. We found that floor was the fastest, so we just wanted to see if that was. So I'm very proud of you. Like they're like, oh, sure, they are really smart. But they will not always do that. No, well, it's nice too. They don't have a quiet job. Yeah.
Once it gets going, have your own.
Okay, guys, we're gonna get about 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. So if you guys could just make sure that the blades go back into the bag.
Arnett, one of the vowels is super short.
I didn't realize that until afterwards. I got them all at the same time.
Ready? Here we go. Ready? Go.
still running when you started. I wonder if maybe maybe you started at my family.
Pick out one, go back to two.
So I went to stay out and check her number. Even though okay, ready, set, go. Really did today.
Well, we were.
It does. It does get to that. It's nice to see it all doesn't get started.
Okay, so I know that, you guys got a chance to play around with the equipment. I hope, at this point, like in our Stellar Girls session, we would probably, if our girls went so far as to make their own blades, we would have a little competition. We also, I believe that after we finished our variables, that we had the girls compete with their little variable. We do a lot of competitions for stickers and candy and, at the end. But you can do, like, obviously, if they do their own blades, it's a competition for who designs the best turbine. But if you don't have time for that, and you split them out to do variables, my suggestion is that once they get done, they should pick what they think is their best, and then on the same piece of equipment, you can have them run their best and work out competition kind of that way. But does everybody feel comfortable with the equipment? Do you have any questions about setting up the equipment or anything that?
How much do they cost?
Anne was saying she thought it was about $150
For one.
right, for one. It's
We
about
have
$150.
some, so I'll go back to the locker and see what we have. And certainly, if you plan to implement it, I would like to support that with what we have.
Yeah, I mean, they used to, and I feel bad because part of the reason why they're all out here is because I misread the thing, but if you're, if it's something that you want to do, remember, you really only need to have one piece of equipment because they can come up and test independently. You just have to kind of think about that, but part of the reason why it's off the books now is because people got the kits and literally never opened the boxes. So, that's a waste. That's a huge waste if people aren't going to use them.
I have one.
Yeah,
I've used it a couple times.
I
actually used it
I
in
had
first grade.
two, and then I inherited some from one of the other teachers, which is why I have the 4 that I have. But when we've done Stellar Girls, we've only had, I don't think we even pulled out 4. We only pulled out a few. The big problem is the storage of the fans.
Jill was saying she doesn't have the white piece.
This, I think, is a separate part of the kit.
Okay.
So it used to come in one of the kits, but apparently now it's like you can buy it as a separate piece. I know you'll have to look. It's all on KidWin. It's all on KidWin, and it is actually a really worthwhile investment, I think. So
I think they can see how the machine will do work and everything, so.
yeah, but do you guys have any other questions about setting it up or anything like that? You feel comfortable with it? How many of you guys feel like you feel comfortable enough that you would do it?
I would do this over, yeah, the candle thing, I'm afraid I'm gonna set off the fire alarms and then the fire department's going to come and
Yeah.
that was my big fear is all the water gonna come out.
The candles are, especially if you've got younger girls, the candles are a little iffy. But
Yeah.
I mean, you could do all of it as like a little wind package, right? You could do all of it if you wanted to. Now we are not going to have time to do this today because we are actually running behind. But as part of our conservation, because this is the saving part of it, we have 2. iBio runs a STEM Girls Camp in the summer, and this year's topic was conservation. And